All right. I think that we're all good. Margot has decided to crawl on the dining room table. No, Margot, now is not a time. No, go lay down. Margot. Hi, folks. How you doing? It's like she can tell the time. She knows exactly when is the worst time to jump up onto the table. And here she is. Could you... Come here. Get... No. I got you. Mm-hmm. Well, now what are you going to do, All right. You're going to sit right here on the cat bed right next to me where you're supposed to. Think that's going to happen? No? Okay, cool. All right, so let's see here. I think I got everything set. Let me go to live chat instead. There we go. Let's see. Savannah, Georgia. I got Virginia, Queensland, Quebec. Let's see. Aberdeen, Scotland. Rainy Markham. Kent, England. Unsettlingly warm at Washington, D.C. Yeah, it was pretty warm here earlier in the week, and now it's cold. And I think on Tuesday, on Halloween, it's supposed to snow. So I've been there before as a little kid, walking around in your cool Halloween costume that you like a lot, but you have to wear a winter coat over it because it's snowing. Happens once in a while. Let's see here. Clearwater, rainy West Virginia. Good old Margot. I think she's finally decided to go someplace else. That's good for now. Surprisingly chilly Central Texas. How you doing, Feisty Crab Man? She's one cute cat. She is a very cute cat. She's a calico, but she's a dilute calico. So instead of being black and orange and white, she is gray and tan and white because she's like diluted colors or whatever. So, and her sister Maggie, who does not climb on the dining room table, she is a dilute tortoiseshell. So she's like a mixture of, instead of being of black and orange, like all kind of like blended together, it's more gray and tan again as well. And she has pretty much no white on her. You even have a window open? That's nice. North Carolina, Dallas, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan. There were no bad times for cat appearances. I mean, luckily she didn't knock anything over, I guess, like my coffee. That was what I was concerned about the most. Buffalo, Caledonia, Pittsburgh, dreary New York City. Temps dropped a bunch, so it was weird to wake up to cooler temps this morning. Yeah. From a dreary northern German afternoon, I'm spending the day in painting some 15mm French regulars for an upcoming French and Indian War campaign. Nice. Elkhart, Indiana. Snow here in the Mitten on Halloween. Yeah. I mean, looking at the weather, and again, we're kind of far out, but it looks like they're like, oh, it's gonna snow, and I'm like, it looks like it's gonna snow real early in the morning for like a little bit, but still, that's technically snow, I guess. Like I have walked as a little kid, I walked with boots and a winter jacket on in the snow to go trick or treating, like at least once. It doesn't happen all the time, but it doesn't happen nearly as much as it used to. But sunny South Wales. Sunny would be nice. Yeah, it's pretty just gray today. Cloudy Milwaukee. How you doing, Jesse? Springfield. Tuesday in Chicago, we're going to get some snow. Yeah. Bournemouth? Is it Bournemouth? It's not Bournemouth, I'm sure, but yes. Fantasy a la Lord of the Rings. Yes, what I'm going to do, so the topic today is about your favorite genre for wargaming. And so I'm going to use a feature in the thing here in YouTube. I can make a poll. What's your favorite wargaming genre? Now, when I say this, what I mean is the fluff, the lore. Not, oh, I like skirmish games or I like rank and flank, stuff like that. I mean, I like Sci-fi. Fantasy. Let's see, what else have we got? Is historical too broad? Probably not. Historical. Steampunk. Really? We can only have 4? YouTube, come on, man. You can have 4 options? That's... Oh, for God's sakes. I guess if I would have known that, I would have used a system that works instead and set up a poll externally. You can only use 4. Neat. Okay. Well, then I guess we'll get rid of steampunk and add other, which makes this nearly useless. Man, just like, you know, if only the scrappy little upstart that was Google could eventually just make things work a little bit, that'd be great. That'd be so cool. All right. Let's see here. I taught Zoom classes during COVID. Some teachers hated seeing pets. They were just wrong. Pet breaks for sanity. Oh, for sure. For sure. Hello from Pittsburgh, working 24 hours at a firehouse today. Thanks for making it more bearable. Absolutely. Painting some minis for Don't Look Back in Cleveland this morning. Nice. On the fantasy game genre font, I hate how it is increasingly just funny. Same goes for superheroes. I'm not a prude, but serious stories are good too. I guess I don't know what you're talking about. Like, as far as like funny, like increasingly just funny. So like fantasy is like comic or like comedic, I guess is the word I'm looking for maybe. And same with superheroes, I suppose. I don't know. Some people like comedy in their game. That was weird. My feed just froze for a sec. Jim Crimmins, how you doing? Hello from Portugal. Let's see here. Expect a lot of people dressed up for the seaside with a vague theme of a costume. Sure. VJ Morph, how you doing? Did you see MS Paint's Halloween video? It's pretty awesome technically about Fury of Dracula, but a great meta-themed Halloween. I saw the thumbnail for it. I think he had fangs in the thumbnail, but I haven't watched it. Is Fury of Dracula, isn't that a board game? So I thought he usually, well, I suppose there's probably models in it. Lately I've been leaning hard into fantasy, but sci-fi isn't leaving my head in canon anytime soon. Sure. I mean, honestly, if you just put it here in the chat as well, that's fine too, because it'll get captured and then I can take a look at it later on or something. So if you've got a theme, if one of the things doesn't fit on the 4 choices in the poll, digital scarcity is stupid, just FYI. Then throw it in the chat here. That's fine too. Post-apocalyptic. Yeah, I was going to put that one in. I was going to put that in there. I'm generally a big fan of that too, honestly. I don't know why, but I am. My wife is up visiting the newest grandbaby. Nice. Congrats on the grandbaby. Fantasy. Make a Google form really quick. Yeah, I should have done that ahead of time if I would have known that they were going to be dumb about it. Played my first game of Underworlds yesterday. Had a lot of fun. Didn't expect to have. Well, that's good. Yeah. I mean, Underworlds is a really good... I generally call it a gateway game because it goes between like board gaming and miniature gaming because it straddles that fence, but it's kind of what it's designed to do. Morning from Ottawa. YouTube never stopped letting us down. Indeed. Morning from Wisconsin. How's the weekend shaping up? Okay, not too bad. I worked a good portion of yesterday on a couple of models that I need for the zine. So I'm going to do some photography on them this week so I can finish up the zine. I also worked on zine layout, and I also played a bit of Starfield, and I went to dinner with my wife. I think that's about it. Pretty much about it. I had a lovely tenderloin salad. Let's see here. I vote sci-fi out of Warhammer 40k, but in terms of story, I'm fine with both sci-fi and fantasy. Gotcha. Answer the poll sci-fi, but tabletop role-playing tends to be fantasy. Well, I mean, I was mainly talking about wargaming, but it's interesting. Like, it's interesting that in role-playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons is generally the most popular, and in miniatures, basically miniature wargaming, science fiction seems to be kind of the most popular, just because of 40k. But although Age of Sigmar is also doing good work, so. Still having fun with Space Station Zero, ready to take the plunge on Majestic 13. Nice. Time for more paint on my Edo for Space Station Zero. Nice. Are you talking about Borderlands level comedy? I mean, the thing about Borderlands is, the video game, is that the comedy can be, because it's, there's animation and reaction to what you're doing in the game and stuff like that, the comedy can be a lot more reactive. You know what I mean? Like something happens or you go to a new area and then this thing happens and there's whatever and blah, blah, blah. And it can be a lot more related to what's going on. Whereas I think sometimes specifically in wargaming, things fall flat because you're generally not reading the book in order. You're kind of like paging through looking for bits. And so you kind of have to take that into consideration when you try to make a book, a wargaming rule set that's funny, is that you can't like do the normal kind of setup and knock down sort of thing that you get in comedy. I guess it's a little bit harder to do that. Whereas in a video game, you like trigger a thing and then we see a little tableau, a little vignette of a thing that happens or whatever. Or maybe they just say funny things, which are kind of non sequiturs. I know a lot of that happens in Borderlands. I haven't played Borderlands 2 or 3, but I played a decent amount of Borderlands 1. Let's see here. Historical might be too broad. People into low-level hell may not like Napoleonics. Sure, yeah. Superhero and fantasy stories must always have a comedy element. D&D movie and more for superhero movies. In the movies, it's because it does well. It's literally algorithmic. I think that... Well, to be fair, also, I guess if you look at it, I mean... C-3PO and R2-D2 are the comedy relief of Star Wars, and that movie's 3,000 years old. Okay, it's not. It's from the 70s, but so am I. Yeah, so, like, stories very frequently have, unless it is a straight-up capital D drama, generally stories will have, if they want to appeal to more people, have some comedic elements as well. I mean, Shakespeare used to do that. You'd have this very terrible thing happening on, and then you'd have this weird comedic kind of relief thing, because it would give you, so you wouldn't be constantly just pressed down by the drama. You'd be like, oh, here's a little respite, that kind of thing. And I think that that's partially what, movies have been doing that for years, but specifically nowadays with like how well the Marvel movies did and all that kind of stuff, like as they did that, and they saw reactions, they're like, okay, keep doing that because the algorithm says we should or whatever, that kind of thing. So, but yeah. I mean, there are some, I was going to say there are some superhero movies that don't go out in that direction, but I'm betting there was some even little sliver of comedic relief in like a movie like Logan, which is a pretty dark movie, but still superheroes. You know what I mean? Going from Gilbert, Arizona. Love this channel and every other Sunday. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Poland, still warm today. Well, that's good. Fury of Dracula is a board game. The first time I saw that, I was like Fury or like Furry of Dracula. I didn't know what that meant exactly. I'm way behind here. Let's see. Cyberpunk, sure. Fantasy all the way, but I do like sci-fi, sure. Original was a board game from GW in the 80s. I guess it clocks under our world. I've heard the name before of the, but I did not realize it was originally a GW game. That's interesting. Since Dead by Lead coming out, I have been head over heels for Western and Weird West. See, that's the thing that I'm not super interested in is Western. I don't know why, but like Western style games, it's just not, I don't know. I don't watch too many Western movies. Maybe that's part of it too. 55% sci-fi, 45% fantasy. But I'm pleased as punch in either genre. Nice. Hello from Utah. How you doing? Historical gaming is my favorite, but I guess I'm in the minority. I mean, obviously, it used to be the biggest deal. Like when miniature wargaming, well, when it first started, it was all historical because it was, it was H.G. Wells and it was like Napoleonics and a lot of stuff like that. If you go back and look at pictures of the earliest Gen Con, the events back when it was still just called Geneva Convention, because it took place in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and it was a play on words, kind of, to some degree. They were all playing historical war games because that's what there was at the time. And then all of a sudden they started getting into like, well, what if it was like historical wargaming like we're doing now, but instead of being historical, what if it was like Lord of the Rings? And then they started having fantasy wargaming, and then eventually a couple of guys were like, what if instead of running a whole group of people, I was just this one guy and you were just that guy? And then that's how D&D started. Those guys' names were Gary and Dave. But yeah, so, over time, historical has gotten less popular in comparison to, say, sci-fi and fantasy for sure. But it's still, been going on, and it's still holding on. Let's see here. Steampunk is one of my favorites. British colonials plus steam tanks and flyers. Sign me up. Nice. Orlando, Florida. How you doing? Spectaculars is an RPG in a box for comics, and they tout the flexibility of capturing all the genres of comics, sci-fi, superhero, pulp, and horror. I've never had great luck with game systems that are like, you can use this in anything, because I feel that sometimes then the rules are too broad, the whole concept of like Aztecs versus astronauts kind of thing, right? Like you could just be like, if you've got the rule set designed so that those two groups can go against each other and be balanced and stuff like that, it just sort of seems weird sometimes. I don't know. Maybe I just haven't found the right one. Excited to see the zine. Absolutely. Should be coming out, not this upcoming Friday, but the Friday after. The 10th of November is when it's coming out. Funny how historicals have only 4% and there are dozen historical eras to wargame in. Like I said, I think it's just generally sales show that it's not as popular as other genres currently. So yeah, it's interesting. Post-apocalyptic tied with any other setting, it's interesting to see it, seeing things pick up the scraps of civilization rebuild. Sure, yeah. Tenderloin salad sounds good. It was good. It was very good. Greetings from Colombia. Been learning about Kill Team with your videos, and I like painting. Not sure about tabletop now. Okay. Kind of want Warcry rule system with sci-fi setting. Of course, there's also Space Station Zero. I mean, technically, Kill Team is kind of using the Warcry rule set. It's taking the Warcry rule set and then tacking a bunch of extra crap on top to some degree. But the basis of Kill Team is pulling from Warcry. It's not the dice thing is not the same where you're throwing 6 dice at the beginning of the turn and all that jazz and whatever. But there are definitely some vibes in there that are kind of the same. So, let's see here. Naval don't matter timeline, but Oak and Iron, Battlefleet Gothic. Sure. Like some people are like, I mean, ships is not necessarily, I guess it's kind of a genre. I'm thinking more of like time setting to something, but not necessarily. I drew on like fictional settings with guns or gun-like weapons. That was kind of an issue when we launched Reign in Hell, is that people were like, some people were like, hey, this is really cool, I'm interested, except that there's no shooting in it. And I really kind of like shooting. So there's that. Let's see here. Awesome Friday night off from the club this week. Spent it at home with the family watching Goonies for the first time with Declan. He loved it. Well, I suppose so, yeah. I can understand that. Finishing up my Undead or Alive minis to make room for my Marvel Zombies Kickstarter today. Nice. Nick Jones says, I love the 40k lore a lot, but play bolt action these days because of the expense. Yeah, I can understand that for sure. I mean, bolt action in general, as far as expense is concerned, that everything is a bit cheaper for sure. but also you need kind of less of it in many situations, you know? Like a general bolt action army, and if they've changed things, let me know, but generally it's between 25 and 30 individual figures and a tank. That's generally your bolt action, your entire bolt action army is between maybe 20 and 25 or 20 and 25 or 20 to 30, but somewhere around there. It's very few, and then, you know, a tank. It's not skirmish. It's not like 5 guys in a tank or whatever. But yeah, it's generally fewer models. So that also helps. And also generally this stuff is a bit less expensive. Now, you know, there can be more metal models in there than you might want sometimes, if depending if whether you like metal models or not. But yeah, generally the tanks aren't metal. That would suck. Luckily they're plastic. I prefer the genre of fantasy over sci-fi, although I like both. Specifically, Middle-earth strategy battle game is my favorite fantasy war game. It is a good game from what I understand. Also introduced him to E.T., which has decided to be the best films ever. Nice. I like pretty much all genres, but I definitely tend towards sci-fi, especially since it can be such a wide genre that covers a lot of subgenres that I like. I mean, yeah. I mean, you can get post-apocalyptic into sci-fi. You know, you can get it. You can get all kinds of things into sci-fi, but this is kind of the same with fantasy too. I don't know that I've ever seen a post-apocalyptic fantasy. I mean, a lot of fantasy is kind of post-apocalyptic to some degree. You know what I mean? Like you can definitely get this sort of like, you know, like, well, I was going to say Frostgrave is almost post-apocalyptic, but it's not like the whole world was affected by this. It was just that one city, which has now been called Frostgrave because it got frozen, and now it's 1,000 years later and it's finally starting to thaw out. That's kind of an apocalypse, but just for like one town. Well, bigger than a town, but you know what I'm saying. This is exactly the question I was debating for a while yesterday. The real answer is I need to actually just play a game in either. I mean, that's helpful for sure. You know, it's harder to play than it is to paint. It's interesting how many people will disagree with that line. But I do honestly believe it is harder to play than it is to paint. And it's mainly because so many people still have to try to find a group to play with. If you have a group you play with on the regular, well, then it's probably easier to paint or play than paint, maybe for you. Or maybe it's equal. That's fine too. But for a lot of people out there, they get into the hobby, they're attracted to something in the hobby, and then you can at any time, middle of the night, get up in the morning, you know, and start painting if you want to. But if it's you get up in the middle of the night, you can't just go and play a tabletop war game. I kind of touched on that on Friday's video a little bit about how one of the reasons I think video games make so much money and are so popular is because you can do it whenever. And with tabletop games, not just war games, but board games, you know, RPGs, all that kind of stuff, there's all those memes and like jokes that go around about trying to get your RPG group together like all at the same time and how difficult that is. And it's just the way it kind of works, you know. That is the trick about tabletop gaming. I feel like guns don't translate as well into RPGs or versus tabletop miniature games. Not sure why, it just seems to be the case. I don't know. I mean, you know, I used to play back in the day, played a lot of Shadowrun, and I was always a shooty character. I was never a like a street samurai type of guy with like a blade or anything like that. I do know that in the in the Cyberpunk 2077 video game, if you play your perks right, then it is way better to be melee than it is to be shooty. Like if you get your perks set up properly, then you go into any kind of combat and you just start cutting off people's heads, and then like they really can't shoot back once they've had their head cut off. I don't know if it breaks the game. It sort of felt like it broke the game to me, but in a good way, because I was happy about it. I don't have a problem. I don't want my video games to be crazy hard. I like being able to go into a room of 6 or 7 guys with guns and then just cut them all in half. And that's a lot of fun in that particular game. Just a little bit of a side there. It's an interesting idea, though, about tabletop RPGs, whether the gunplay is a thing that makes sense in tabletop RPGs. Probably already talked about this on Friday on Twitch, which I missed, but now that Twitch is going to go allow simulcasting, are you thinking about taking advantage of that? I did talk a little bit about it Friday, and I don't know. So, for those of you that don't know, for years, Twitch has always been like, yeah, if you're an affiliate or a partner, meaning you're getting paid, then you can't simulcast, which is to say, I could be technically streaming this to YouTube and to Twitch at the same time. There's a piece of software, you send it there, and then it sends it out to the two places at once, and yada, yada, yada. You can't do that. Well, now you can. They just decided they had TwitchCon like last week or 2 weeks ago, and one of the big new announcements was they're like, hey, if you want to, you can. And there's little special caveats about certain things, but for the most part, like, yeah, you can. I don't know if there's a benefit to doing it necessarily. One of the benefits to simulcasting, specifically my normal Twitch chat where I sit there and I paint miniatures, which I do right here on Monday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, and Friday mornings at 10 a.m. Central. You can come by and check it out. Follow me here on, or not, you can follow me on Twitch, not here on YouTube. You already probably do follow me on YouTube, but maybe you don't. Twitch.tv/tabletop minions. There you go. The benefit could be then, because Twitch only holds on to VODs, as they call video on demand, aka the recording of your live show. They only hold on to those for 60 days. So if somebody wants to go back and watch a video from 90 days ago, like I was painting, I don't know, let's say Necrons. I've had people be like, hey, or like, some whatever model. And they're like, hey, how'd you paint that? And I'll be like, well, I could tell you, but it got deleted 2 months ago. You know what I mean? Because it was from 4 months ago. So the benefit is that YouTube doesn't do that. You can go back and watch every other Sunday shows for as long as I've been doing them. They're all saved on the channel. So multi-streaming like that would then also put the recording directly onto YouTube and people could watch it later, even if it was after 60 days. I don't know. I don't know if that's a big deal or not. I don't know if it's a big, I don't know. I haven't really decided yet. I've kicked around the idea of just leaving Twitch altogether and just completely doing all of my live streaming here on YouTube, because this is where the majority of my people are, right? Like I have nearly 227,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and I have followers, which is basically the same thing on Twitch, 18,000 maybe, 17,000, something like that. So, I don't know. It's something I've thought about, but I haven't come up with a great idea yet. Where are we at on the poll here? 50% a chance, or 50% people say sci-fi, 35% say fantasy, 8% say historical, and 7% say other. Interesting. All right. Let's see here. I love playing Flames of War, World War II historical gaming. I tried 40K, but it just wasn't for me. Orlando, Florida. Sure. I think it does definitely depend on a lot of different things. Things that you're interested in. I don't really watch a lot of historical movies, and I don't really read a lot of historical books. I like some fantasy stuff, like, movies and things like that. Lord of the Rings, that's great. The majority of the type of like movies and TV shows that I generally do enjoy seeming to watch are generally science fiction stuff. It just seems to, I don't know, it's always been an attraction to me. When Star Wars was originally in the theater, I was like 7, maybe 8 years old, and my mom was taking me to go see a movie at a theater that wasn't Star Wars. We were going to see a Benji movie. I don't know if you remember Benji. He was a dog. There's a whole series of movies about this dog that would go and do stuff, and his name was Benji. You can look him up on Google. Benji the dog. Anyway, we were going to see Benji the dog, and we bumped into some people my mom knew in the parking lot who were just leaving Star Wars. And they basically were like, oh, Star Wars was really good. I bet you Adam would really like it, and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And so my mom was like, so do you want to go see Star Wars instead of Benji? And I was like, okay, sure. And then that was, I think, one of those points, you know what I mean, in life where then it goes different directions. So if I had been like, nah, let's go see the dog movie, I don't know, things would be different now in some sense. I assume that's maybe some sort of a choke point. I don't know. Could be wrong. But yeah. Let's see here. Best humor in wargaming comes directly from my gameplay. My dice rolling is hilarious. Nice. Goodness gracious. I'm way behind. Good Lord. Oh, there we go. I caught up. All right. So, sci-fi is my go-to, but I'm a big fan of the cyberpunk theme. I just haven't found a game in that genre that suits me yet. Fingers crossed for Combat Zone. Also, TNT is a great post-apocalyptic narrative game. This is not a test. Is that what you're saying when you mean TNT? Yep. Combat Zone is cool. It's not necessarily. Look, this other game is not necessarily for everybody. Kill Sample Process if you're looking for cyberpunk type stuff. Also, honestly, if you like This Is Not a Test, you might want to take a look at a game made by Osprey called Reality's Edge, because it's written by the same guy that wrote This Is Not a Test. Reality's Edge, I believe that's what it's called. Reality's Edge. That's a cyberpunk miniatures game, like a skirmish game. So if you like TNT, This Is Not a Test, then you might be interested in Reality's Edge from, I think it's Osprey. I'm 90% sure it's Osprey. Let's see here. Star Wars is from a long time ago. True. I've been interested in historical, but I haven't been able to get into the gaming aspect. I've been enjoying collecting and painting more sci-fi lately. Still trying to get into games. Yep. Yeah. Like I said, it's kind of the hardest part, I think. Finishing off even more Imperial Guard today. Nice. Sci-fi, fantasy, weird World War, etc. Don't worry me. I'll play whichever has the coolest looking models personally. Gotcha. Logan did have some chuckles, like when they gave him the Wolverine haircut. Yeah, see, they always kind of work that into those types of movies. It's a story structure thing. Like I said, it's been going on since Shakespeare, I think. Probably even sooner or earlier. Han was also pretty funny, and it would just fit fine in a modern Marvel movie. Humor in Star Wars is part of what set it apart from other super serious sci-fi at the time. Sure. I mean, it was very different than THX 1138, that's for sure. Scranton, Pennsylvania. Just received my hard copy of Space Station Zero. Any advice on trying solo or co-op first? I think that solo is not a bad idea to start with, and the reason for that is because then you can get more used to the game. If you see yourself needing to teach it to somebody, if you're going to be playing co-op at some point with somebody, which then you're going to probably have to teach them how to play it, unless they already know how to play. You know, like if they have their own copy and now you're going to get to play co-op, well, then you don't have to worry about it. But it's a good idea. That's one of the things that I like about games that have a solo aspect to them, is that I don't have to go into it playing against somebody later on and having this be both of our first games, right? If you can be playing it solo and get the hang of it and do X amount of challenges, excuse me. So yeah, X amount of different challenges and stuff like that, which are scenarios basically in that game. You will eventually all of a sudden be like, okay, now I understand how everything works. So when it's time to teach, you're not going, well, I think this is how this works, because you've played multiple, missions at this point. So that's one of the benefits, I think, of solo play, is that when you are going to teach it to somebody, you will already know how to play because you've already played it a bunch, basically against the game by yourself. So there's that, I think, which is a big benefit. Does Space Hulk count as a war game? I think so. It's definitely a bit of a gateway game. I think that when I talked about it a long time ago, one of the first times I talked about it on the channel, I definitely talked about how it was a really good gateway game, and that's why I bemoaned the fact that it's not available in stores all the time. Because I'm like, this is the game that helps to get people into miniatures, and you guys just decide not to carry it sometimes, or all the time, mostly, except for a few times when you've decided to actually make more. Yeah. Nolan's Batman trilogy had bits of humor, though it was sparse. Yeah, that's true. But there was still a little bit here and there. I prefer sci-fi lore. I would argue 40K has the best world building today. You could argue that. I don't know that I would agree with it, but sure. It's also the game that I am least likely to play. I enjoy painting fantasy more and prefer historicals for non-mini war games. Interesting. Flames of War is a great game system, easy to learn, and great value on the army and starter boxes. It's, I played Flames of War, in the 2010s, 20 early 2010s. I played Flames of War for a while with some friends. Um, we never really got good at it or got the hang of it. We all, we had painted up armies and we like had all kinds of little buildings. And one of my friends got really good at making bocage, and so he made, feet and feet and feet and feet of bocage. And we would spend an hour and a half or more setting up our cool little village on a 4x6 table, and then we would play for like an hour or two until we eventually just were like, I think you won. I don't know, because like the rules at the time to us, because we didn't play enough, were also a bit inscrutable. And so, but we did really have a good time setting up little villages and all that stuff. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, it just didn't live or land with us. And the only reason I got into it was two things. Number one is because I hit the age of like 42. So this is about 10 years ago. And that seems to be the median age or whatever. That seems to be the average age when at least men, I don't know about women, but men are all of a sudden like, World War II is interesting. And I don't know why that is, but there was a survey about it. If you take a look at the Great Wargaming survey that Wargames Soldiers and Strategy magazine puts out every year, they've found that like the age that people get into historicals on average or whatever seems to be around 42 years old. And that's dead on when I was all of a sudden like, but it didn't stick. I'm not interested in World War II games anymore. Weird World War II, different story, but actual World War II, and it's just partially, and I'm not interested in World War II video games anymore either. The issue is for me, and this doesn't have to be for anybody else, but for me, the issue is that I don't know if I want to play a game out of something that, like, there are still people alive today that affected, that went through that. You know what I mean? My wife's grandfather was a Marine Raider in the Pacific theater, and so I just don't know if I want to make a game out of that necessarily. Now, if it's also got like, werewolves and laser tanks, different story at that point for me. But like a regular historical. Now, if you're talking about like really, really old historicals, like ancients, well, those people are all gone. So I'm not going to be, bumming anybody out. But, I'm also, I don't know. For some reason, most historicals just don't seem to do it for me, and I don't know why. I think it's just because I want to have more, for me, I want to have more agency over what I'm going to be doing. I want to be able to like change, like the one thing that kind of comes up and you see in the genre for historicals a lot is that if it's historical, you're supposed to be following the history. Like, oh, well, the soldiers of that time period didn't wear that color pants. Napoleon said no gray, only blue, or whatever the deal was. And so people talk about rivet counters and things like that. People who are very specific about, no, you're doing it wrong because history says this. I don't want to follow that. I want to do my own thing. So that's why I like fantastical type games like alternate history, science fiction, fantasy, yada, yada, post-apocalyptic, all that stuff. Do you prefer to play solo versus co-op or team? Yeah, that's a good question too. I mean, I think the majority are going to be playing versus, obviously, but I think that solo and co-op are definitely starting to get bigger. Western genre, it lends itself well to skirmish-sized wargaming. You're not wrong. It's just that I don't know. There's something about the actual genre itself that I'm not as interested in. And again, it's not like the same thing with World War II. It's not like, oh, my grandpa was shot by Jesse James. Like, because probably not, unless you're really, really, really old too. I don't know. So yeah, I don't know why that is, but yeah. You should look into Country Road Z. It's a newer game, recently sponsored with custom minis by Blackside Studios. Oh, I'm familiar with it. The creator comes to Tabletop Minions Expo, the little convention that I run here in Wisconsin, the last 2 years, I believe, and has run demos and things like that. I'm 98% sure it's the creator, the designer, who comes and runs it. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it was good to see that that they got affiliated with Blackside Studios. That's really cool. I think it's smart that Blackside Studios is like, look, we're going to just start making miniatures for stuff for, smaller companies and like starting to work with a lot more indie people. I think that's really cool about Blackside. I only like my Wild West if it's wiki Wild West. I get you. Tabletop Minions is not a channel that draws a lot of historical wargamers, so the poll is rigged. I mean, probably not wrong, I suppose. Just mainly because I just don't, like I said, it's not an interest area. I've had a lot of people ask me, they're like, why don't you talk about historicals, or why don't you talk about Battletech, or why don't you talk about this game, or why don't you talk about that game? And it's generally because I'm not interested in playing that game, or I'm not interested in talking about that game. If this was a news site and I was a journalist, then I should probably talk about things that I'm not interested in, but that's not how the internet works. You know what I mean? This is, I've had people say, well, that's just your opinion. And I'm like, yeah, the whole thing is my opinion. That this is not journalism. This is opinion. To be fair, most journalism is opinion, it seems like these days too. So we got that going on for us, which is great. But yeah, it's the reason I don't generally talk about stuff that I'm not interested in, because I don't know that I'm going to be able to do it justice. But I bet you there are other channels out there that are talk mainly about that one specific thing because that's what they like, and so then they can do it justice. And I think that's the good thing about the internet in general, and also tabletop wargaming, is that we do have a lot of different genres and things like that. I've noticed Osprey Games has a ton of sub-genre games. I want to try the Mythic Fantasy, On Guard, and Pulp. Yeah, no, they throw a lot at the wall to see what sticks. They do. And sometimes stuff sticks. Look at Gaslands. Like, Gaslands was one of those cheap little blue cover books that they cranked out that all of a sudden went completely crazy, and then they were like, oh crap, and then they had to make like a full-blown, fancy hardcover full color ebook, called Gaslands Refueled, which is basically the fancy version of Gaslands, plus it has extra stuff in it and all that jazz and whatever. So yeah, sometimes that does take off, and then other times they put something out there and it does okay, and other times stuff does, whatever. But yeah, they definitely throw a lot of stuff out there, which is good. I'm glad that they give those types. That they had was it a year, maybe a year and a half ago? They just put out like a social media post, in all their different channels. They were just like, hey, you got an idea for a miniatures game? Hit us up. Let us know. They're just looking to publish stuff. And I'm wondering if that's where Doomed came from. Like, the Doomed is one of it's not their most recent. Their most recent miniature game, I think, is a game, I don't know if you can get it in hardcover or not, or hard copy, but it's on the Wargame Vault website, and it's basically an alternate history World War I game. Has the word tomorrow in it. I don't remember what it's called. But anyway, it just came out a couple weeks ago. Best Western is Shadows of Brimstone. Just needs a wargame set of rules. I know a guy who's really into that game. He's painted hundreds and hundreds of models for that game. I'm always curious if I can do the maths to simplify the amount of rolls in various systems to reduce the amount more to an XCOM style percentage roll that you then roll against. That could take a lot of charting, honestly. I believe that what's happening in XCOM, when it's like, hey, this is your percentage to hit, is it's taking all those kind of miniature game style rules. Oh, this guy moved, so therefore he's -1 to hit. And he's shooting through cover, so he's another -1 to hit. And the thing over there is this distance away, so then he's this to hit. And then it does all that math behind the scenes and tells you you've got a 35% chance, right? But it's still basically working off the same rules. So for you to just go, this guy hits on 35%, well, but what if there's something in the way? Well, okay, then I guess it's technically he loses 10%. Okay, well then what about this? Well, then we're back on page 1 again, right? We're back at, the first step. So yeah, it looks like XCOM, like the video game, is just telling you you've got this percentage to hit, but it's figuring that out based off of the type of weapon, the skill level of the person has, dodge numbers, the person they're shooting at. I mean, I don't know what the stats are behind the scenes, but it is working off of those and then giving you a number, and that's kind of what's going on there. So it's not that it's simplifying it, it's just doing the hard math and then just telling you, try to get above a 40% or whatever, you know what I mean? On like a D100. Good morning, everyone. I really liked your latest Twitch stream. Those decals look great. Well, thanks. I was working on some of them yesterday, and some other ones. I have discovered that I think it's a smart idea. Okay, so I got ahead of myself, and normally what I do when I put down decals is I first paint down a layer of gloss varnish, let it dry, and then I put the decal over the top of it. I didn't do that on Friday because I basically got the decal cut out, put it in the water, and then looked at the model and went, oh, I forgot to put down gloss varnish. And I didn't want the decal to sit in the water for 10, 15 minutes while I wait for the gloss to dry. So I was just like, all right, well, I'll try this other stuff, which is called micro set. And you're supposed to put that stuff down and then put the stuff on top of it, yada, yada, yada. I don't think it worked because I look at those models, I look at on the Chimera specifically, and they call it frosting, but not like cake frosting, but like it has frosted, and now it, So what happens is that when you put a decal over a matte surface, it looks great until the water underneath the decal dries, because there's the way that a matte surface, if you look at it microscopically from the side, let's say, it's made out of little tiny pockets, so that when the light comes down and hits it, it bounces off in random directions, and that's what diffuses the light. So you don't get like a mirror finish. You get it bounces the light. You don't get that specular highlight. A glossy finish will give you a direct bounce back into your eye, and then that's why it looks kind of shiny, right? Well, when you have those little tiny pockets, microscopic pockets underneath the water slide decal, they're filled with water. And then when the water dries, then all of a sudden underneath your decal gets kind of white and slightly frosted. So if you watch again on Monday, you'll see that some of those on the Chimera specifically, you can see where the plastic was cut out and it's a little lighter underneath. So they're not, I can't fix it. I can hide it by just putting grunge and junk over the top of it. But what it taught me is that microset doesn't, I don't know what the heck it does, but it doesn't do anything useful as far as I can tell. Microsol seems useful. Microset, not so much. For me, what's the best idea is to start by putting down a gloss coat where I want to put the decal and then going from there, because it's worked on everything else I've done. It was just on Friday, I got ahead of myself and then didn't put it down. And then I read the bottle for microset and I'm like, well, this says to put this down first and it should be fine. And it didn't, it was crap. It didn't work out. So, yeah. So in the future, I'm going to be putting down gloss coat, waiting for it to dry, then putting the stuff on top of it. So I may make a video about it because I see so many people talking about microset and microsol, and microsol works, like I said, pretty well because it's a solvent. And so it helps to kind of like, on curves and things like that, it helps to soften up the thing. But honestly, if you're putting stuff on a flat surface, like on a tank or a vehicle or whatever like that, you don't need either of those. You just need to throw it on a gloss coat, wait for it to dry, put your thing on top of the gloss coat, wait for that to dry, and then put a gloss coat over the top of it again, and then matte varnish it later, and it looks great. So lesson learned, I guess. Bolt action is good, but I prefer Conflict 48 as I need some weird in my World War II. Yeah, same here. Werewolves and laser tanks is basically the case there. I enjoy getting into bolt action. And it will probably get into more historical, but the alternate history games have more appeal. Conflict 47, Turn Up 28, etc. Yeah, oh, for sure. Same here. Spectaculars has booklets for the different genres to focus on the characters. Not familiar with that. Started with historical in the 70s, but I haven't gone back to this since then. Fantasy is my main genre, although I really like sci-fi as well. Gotcha. This channel doesn't draw a lot of historical gamers, so poll is off. I mean, I can take historical off of there if you want me to put something else on there. Let's see here. I'm cursed with liking both fantasy, sci-fi, and a bunch of historical periods. I mean, liking a lot of things is sometimes difficult in this hobby because then you end up with a lot of things. I know what you're talking about. Any recommendations for foldable terrain options for people like me who live in a small apartment for I know there was a company that made terrain that was kind of like kids' pop-up books. It's like a thing where you like open and then all of a sudden, hey, building or whatever. Maybe just do a Google search for pop-up terrain. You might find something there. I don't know. The other thing is I see people who will use MDF and just never glue it. They'll just like put it together and then take it apart again when they need to store it. But that's... if you want to then paint it, that's hard. And it doesn't work so hot if you want to paint it. Historical gaming is something of a separate world to all the rest, I think. The overlap in that Venn diagram is fairly small. Sure. Old Kill Team 2017. Was it 2017 or is it 2018? I think it was 2018 technically. Got me into wargaming. The lore kept me in 40k. Just wish I could customize like I can in Warcry. Yeah, nope. The new Kill Team is not particularly customizable. I agree. That is one of my biggest issues. Poll doesn't have all options. No, it doesn't. YouTube only allows you to have 4 choices. Like I was going to put in a whole line of choice, and then it got to because it's like add option, and then you get to the 4th one, and then the add option button goes away. So there you go. Post-apocalyptic is my flavor of choice, which I suppose is sci-fi, but can lean into more fantasy depending on setting. To some degree, I mean, technically it depends on when the apocalypse happened. It's generally slightly science fiction, but I mean, if you look at something like Mad Max, that that apocalypse seems to happen potentially like in the 80s. You know what I mean? It's really interesting. So many people have watched Road Warrior, but not nearly as many people have watched Mad Max. I saw Road Warrior first when I was a kid, and then I saw Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and it wasn't until years later that I watched actual Mad Max. And then I watched that, and then I was like, huh, this is weird, because in Mad Max, like the apocalypse, it almost seems as if the apocalypse hasn't started yet. Technically, it has. It's just a slow-moving apocalypse in the first movie, because like the police are working out of like basically a ruined building, and they're fighting against gangs and stuff like that. But the hospital still seems to be just fine. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And like it's definitely got this kind of vibe like the apocalypse has started, but it's not just like a overnight, hey, there's the apocalypse. It's kind of like the early days of it or whatever. And then when you watch Road Warrior, okay, all bets are off. The apocalypse is certainly in full swing. And then you got guys in hockey masks running around and all that, you know. And then you get into Beyond Thunderdome, and then it's, you know, Tina Turner in a chainmail outfit, which is got to be heavy. I heard it was like 60 pounds, that dress. That's gotta suck. Anyway, like I just wouldn't, I mean, you know, I get it for like filming, sure, like that's gotta suck too, but like just she could take it off. Like it seemed like that was what that character wore most of the time, and that's just not particularly useful in my, but you know, whatever. It looked cool. So let's see here. Good morning from Little Elm. Good morning. Fleet battles is a genre, subgenres of historical fantasy and sci-fi. I mean, sure, yeah, there's like I didn't want to go into like, oh, you know, rank and flank or skirmish or whatever. Fleet battles, I don't know, like they're kind of their own thing. I wouldn't say a fleet battle game is rank and flank or skirmish or army, because it's kind of ship battles in general are sort of their own thing, right? Because you've got obviously stuff like Battlefleet Gothic, you've got stuff like Dropship Commander, you've got, you know, historical naval battles, you've got stuff with pirate ships, you've got I mean, honestly, the old school Silent Death, like spaceship combat game, you know, there's lots of different types of games like that, which is it's a very different genre. I mean, if you know, go back to the old Star Trek tactical combat simulator from FASA, I mean, that's definitely kind of like that too. Sci-fi leads the way, but dark fantasy, pseudo-historical, row my boat good. Nice. Hello from Oklahoma. How you doing? I like historical, but also sci-fi. Mind, I suspect that the audience you have is more sci-fi oriented. Without doubt, sci-fi does outsell historic. I mean, like I said, it is a thing that I have a tendency to focus on myself a bit personally in my own gaming. So I guess it does come out a little bit more here in the channel. I do still like fantasy stuff though, to some degree. Yeah, I do. I stopped playing Age of Sigmar when 3rd edition dropped. It'll be interesting to see what happens this coming summer when the new edition comes out. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. It'll also be interesting to see what happens this summer I'm assuming this summer also is when the new Kill Team will come out, because there will be probably a new Kill Team. Now, they may do an update that is very low key, kind of like Warcry. Like when Warcry went from first edition to second edition, I was very concerned that they were going to like completely change it, like they did with going between first edition and second edition of Kill Team, but they didn't. They added a couple little things and tweaked little things, but it was basically the same game. I mean, obviously, like points costs and jazz like that and all that stuff changed, because that's just what Games Workshop does, nonstop added in infinitum. But they didn't completely screw up the game or change it a ton. They just added some things, which were actually kind of nice. The reactions kind of mechanic was very cool, and little things that they tweaked here and there, but for the most part, didn't change. So if I had to guess, I would say that's probably what they're going to do with the new version of Kill Team, which, like I said, should probably come out this upcoming summer, but I don't know. We'll see. Warning from the Pocket Dimension, which has landed in Beckley, West Virginia this weekend, running a paint and take all weekend long at the Glades Resort, hosted by Lonely Hero Games. Well, that's really cool. Haven't seen you pick it, or haven't seen you bring it up. Have you ever played? Have you ever considered playing BattleTech? I played BattleTech in middle school. It was the first war game I ever played. Back before we even had miniatures, we just used little cardboard standees that came in the box. A friend of mine taught me how to play, probably 7th grade or something like that. And then I played a bit in college with actual miniatures. The earliest known miniature I've ever painted is still sitting on my painting desk downstairs, and it's a plastic atlas that I painted with enamel testers paints that I used to use when I painted model airplanes when I was a kid. Poorly, by the way. And that model is not great, but it is sort of painted. These days, I'm more interested in other stuff as far as mech games are concerned. BattleTech is too much for me, and I'm not interested in the lore either. And I don't really like the models. So there's a lot of strikes against it. My mech game of choice these days is Steel Rift by Ash Barker, who runs Guerrilla Miniature Games here on YouTube. It's a YouTube channel. He's up in Canada, and he worked with this company called Death Ray Designs, and they've produced this game called Steel Rift, which I like. I've finished my first force, which is 6 models. And I have another force that I'm going to start building soon. The list is written, so I know what I'm doing. I just need to start putting the parts together. I like Steel Rift better than BattleTech also because Steel Rift, like you could use BattleTech miniatures. I see people do it all the time. It's model agnostic technically, but they also do sell miniatures. And I like their miniatures quite a bit, which is part of the reason why I also like the game. But the thing that I really like about the miniatures is that they come in pieces. It's not just like, here is a thing, paint it, like you get with BattleTech generally. There's a benefit to that to people who don't want to customize and stuff, and that's fine. I get it. But for me, I like to kind of customize things a little bit. So generally, these models for Steel Rift, the like waist and all of the legs are one piece, and then the torso is one piece, and then each arm is a piece, and then you can put in the armaments and the guns if you want to make them really super WYSIWYG and stuff like that. So I like those models quite a bit. I'll have to post pictures of the first force now that they're all done, just so you folks can see them. They're a lot of fun. But yes, and the Steel Rift game I also like is nicely streamlined, and I enjoy it. So that's kind of my particular choice in comparison to BattleTech. I know a lot of people like BattleTech. It's too much for me at this point. I'm not interested. Love 40K too, but play OPR 5 parsecs from home. Nice. What do you think of the Disciples of Zinch for Age of Sigmar? I don't know what they are. I mean, I know what Age of Sigmar is. I know what Zinch is. I don't know what the Disciples of Zinch are. Is that a new kit that came out recently? Painting Mordheimish building. We'll be using it for Moonstone. Nice. I keep hearing more and more about Moonstone. Hopefully, maybe this year at Adepticon, maybe I can get a demo in. We'll see. We need a Time Bandits type game. That would be, I don't know how that would work, but it would, I'm on board. Middle Earth is an amazing rule set. Wish the models were easier to get a hold of, though. Yeah. I think it's a scale issue, and I don't mean physical scale, but like economy of scale kind of situation, right? Dark Souls is post-apocalyptic fantasy. I always thought it was just like another weird like hell dimension. I didn't think it was like, but I guess yeah, maybe I could see that. I mean, that's what's always happening in a fantasy movies. They're trying to basically stop the apocalypse. We have to stop this evil, bad monster guy or whatever, because otherwise he's going to take over the world, which kind of becomes an apocalypse to some degree. I mean, the trick is it becomes an apocalypse to everyone except for that guy, which is kind of different than a standard apocalypse. A standard apocalypse is bad for everybody, generally. Varying degrees of bad, but bad. But when, like, the evil wizard is going to take over the world or whatever, then that's, I don't know if that's the same thing. Like, to most people it seems like an apocalypse, but to a couple of people it seems like things are going just perfectly to plan, I guess. So I don't know. I blame rifts for making me want to mix every genre. Yeah, I could see that for sure. GURPS could do the same thing to you. Yeah. Did I scroll back too far? Just received my hard copy of Space Station Zero. Any advice on trying solo or co-op first? I think I answered that, didn't I? Did I do something wrong here? Yeah, I mentioned I think that solo is a good way to start because then you can learn the rules, and then you can more easily teach it to somebody else. Weird War also fits into sci-fi. More so than say fantasy, for sure. Yeah, I can agree with that. Almost all my models are metal. I got into 40K heavily in the 99 to 2000. Nids and Sisters are all metal. I just don't. I don't want to say I don't like metal models. There are some metal models that I like every once in a great while. Like I think the metal models for Relic Blade. I was like, I could picture the logo, but I couldn't read it in my head. Relic Blade. The Relic Blade miniatures are metal, and they are nice, but it's also because they're limited numbers of pieces. My biggest problem with metal miniatures is when someone's also like, yeah, it's a metal model, and it's also 12 pieces. I'm like, for a dude this big? No, thank you. And before you say that's not a thing, it's a thing. I have built that model years and years ago, and this is mostly all Infinity's fault. Now, Infinity these days, their metal models are far fewer pieces than they used to be, but back in the 2010s, especially the early 2010s, I built an Infinity model that was, I think, at least 14 pieces. Regular dude, yay tall, like regular 28mm dude, 14 pieces. It was a nightmare. So yeah, but nowadays when you've got a metal model that's maybe 2 or 3 pieces, that's not so bad. But I still kind of prefer plastic. I don't know why. Thundar the Barbarian is post-apocalyptic fantasy. It's interesting because it went into a fantasy place, but the apocalypse did happen after there were cars and skyscrapers and crap like that. But it was weird how they were like, oh, well, here in the post-apocalyptic, all of a sudden there's guys with swords and there's like magicians and like, yeah, it was an odd story, but yeah, that one's a hard one to nail down. Earth Dawn is fantasy post-apocalyptic. Earth Dawn. Why do I know that? Oh, the old FASA RPG. I do vaguely remember that. I remember walking by the old FASA booth at Gen Con. They used to always have it in the one corner there when it was still in Milwaukee, and they had this massive, like giant mural kind of thing. It was like a giant tapestry that was like not Night City, that's Cyberpunk. Whatever, the Seattle, I guess, basically, from Shadowrun. It was just like a big sci-fi Seattle painting, and it was probably, I'm not even kidding, it was easily 150 feet long. It was this, like, I was on cloth, and it was massive, and they would always hang it above their booth because their booth was always this massive booth in the corner, and so you could see like the whole, you could always figure out where their booth was. And Earth Dawn, I remember walking by and seeing Earth Dawn there. Let's see here. It's easier to paint than play, especially since COVID. I've gotten into solo games more because of that. I think a lot of people did. I mean, that was the first mistake that Vince and I made, was we did Rain in Hell, put it out there, and then people were like, yeah, I can't really still go to my local store. Is there any way to play this solo? And we were like, huh, yeah, we should have put that in there. So that's why we've put it into every game for the most part since then, because we're just like, it just makes sense. But it also has a big added benefit too, like I said, of that you can learn the game before you start teaching other people, which generally, especially with indie games, you're going to be the advocate. You're going to be the one who's teaching other people. It's rare that you're going to like bop into your local, game store and like sit around and wait for someone to show up who wants to also play Rain in Hell with you, unless you already had that plan set up ahead of time. The concept of the pickup game really only works with the biggest games out there, specifically 40K. If there's a lot of Age of Sigmar players in your local area, and especially if this is like, let's say it's Wednesday night and it's Age of Sigmar night here at the local, Android's Dungeon, game store or whatever, great. Then that makes sense why you're going to get a pickup game. But in most situations, you kind of need to set this up ahead of time. And if it's an indie game, you're probably teaching it very frequently. Not always, but very frequently. I play my own game. No, I play on my own all the time. Some of the people I play with don't, but learning the rules and flow of the game has been more difficult for them. Practice and homework can be important. I agree. I'd love it if you'd simulcast this to Twitch and YouTube. Yeah, I don't know if I would get a lot of... The other problem about simulcasting is that then I have to also try to keep track of two separate chats, which can also be troublesome. Yeah. Twitch must be losing market share to YouTube if they're caving in and allowing a simulcast. I don't know. It is an odd move. I am suspecting that they're doing this because they're like concerned about... I think part of it is that they're just like, they have seen so many big names, like big, huge millionaire type, people who are like, yeah, I'm moving over to YouTube because YouTube's paying me to move over there. And now you wouldn't have to do that. I mean, you could still get paid over, but then then YouTube would be telling you you're exclusive. Yeah, it's an odd thing, but I was kind of surprised. Believe it or not, RuneQuest made me realize you can do anything in RPGs and wargames if you put your mind to it. That and Uncle Adam. Well, I appreciate that. I can watch YouTube easy on my TV. It's a pain to watch Twitch. Oh, I see what you're saying. The other way around then. I thought you wanted to see this on Twitch as opposed to seeing Twitch on YouTube. I get that. I can watch... I've got a Twitch app on my... Well, it's not on my TV. We've got a Apple TV little box that plugs into our regular television, and but yeah, that's got the Twitch app on it. But not all of them do. I don't know that you can watch Twitch. My mom's got a Roku. I don't know if you can watch Twitch on that or not. Voted sci-fi. I like all genres, but prefer sci-fi for tabletop, fantasy for video games, and RPG. I'm also looking at some Viking historicals. Nice. I feel weird. Whoops, then it moved. It says, I feel weird, and then everything slid. Oh my goodness. I'm so far back. Battletech. I blame autocomplete. Still scrolling. There we go. Nope. Dog videos. I think I'm lost. Oh well. I'll figure it out. 14 days for us plebe Twitch affiliates. You partners get 60 days, but now with YouTube forever. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, that's true. I guess I didn't know that. I didn't realize that it deleted after 12 or after 2 weeks, but partners get it for 2 months. Interesting. I feel weird. I prefer fantasy genre, but I play more sci-fi stuff. There we go. I got that. Is there a genre that would be difficult to make for gaming? I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Need to find Benji for my grandbaby. Nice. Sad dog movie. Didn't like to be sad. Sure. Star Wars changed movies, culture, games, toys, and so much more is another example of mixing sci-fi and fantasy, in my opinion, too. I mean, oh yeah, it was definitely... I mean, it's a well, it's kind of more of a samurai movie to some degree, but fantasy. Yeah, I get that. Do you guys like competitive wargaming? I don't play competitive. I'm just not into the tournament scene. But I'm just not a competitive person, I guess. I want everybody to win. I'm an absolute World War II nerd. Play lots of video games, read, etc. But a tabletop, it's just not for me. Gotcha. So Star Wars when I was at the drive-in when I was 5. I still remember it. Nice. Good morning from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Trying to finish an orc combat patrol before the 31st. Tick tock, tick tock. First freeze is coming tonight. Winter is coming. Winter is coming. Yeah, that orc combat patrol is nice. I don't need any more combat patrols, but I think Sam's gonna paint it. For Cyberpunk, you got Infinity and Necromunda. Not sure how you might feel about the rules and gameplay, though. I don't know if I feel like Necromunda is Cyberpunk. Necromunda is kind of its own thing. I like the concept of Necromunda. I wish I liked the rules more. But I like the concept of Necromunda. I think the models are awesome. But I don't know if I would call it Cyberpunk. I don't know if I would call much of anything in the 40K universe cyber anything. Like they're against the idea of cyber. It seems. Infinity, yeah, that's a different story. I could definitely see it being more cyberpunk. That's a good point. My game group has 6 games in rotation, and 4 of them are sci-fi or sci-fi adjacent. Nice. I was born the year Star Wars came out in Australia. Nice. No one ever did a Let's Play for Reality's Edge. Really? Not even Ash over at Guerrilla Miniature Games? I'll have to check that out. That's interesting. Whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, historical, we're all destined to get into trains as we age. I don't know if I will... I'm more annoyed by trains just because I live on the wrong side of the tracks. So anytime I want to go someplace, there's almost always a train. And then I have to wait for it. Any thoughts on the new Cyberpunk Red game? I've played the Borderlands board game, which has a simple system which feels pretty intuitive. I got a copy of it at Gen Con, the Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone. I started working on building the models, but then I've been spending most of my free time is a strong word. I've been spending most of my time outside of making YouTube videos and stuff like that, working on the zine to some degree, and some other stuff as well that I've been working on. So I've had to put that slightly in the back burner, but basically after the zine launches, so in mid-November, I'm going to be switching back to Steel Rift, building my second force for that, and also working on the models for Combat Zone. My plan with those models, they're not the best. They're okay models. And so my idea for them is honestly going to be to build them and then probably use like an enamel wash. So I'm going to paint them very simply and then enamel wash and wipe it away and all that kind of stuff to make everything look kind of grungy. But I'm not going to like spend tons and tons and tons of time on them. But I also, it's partially because I want to get them, on the table faster too. So there's that as well. Let's see here. Belated greetings from cloudy Newark, Delaware. Is that what Delaware? DE? I think so. Having come to wargaming from D&D Fantasy was always my draw, but I'm coming to the end of my 40s. Love the flexibility and variety of settings that sci-fi provides and allows. Yeah, I can understand that. There is definitely a lot of flexibility. I think just because sci-fi is a bit of a more popular genre, which we're also seeing here in the poll, 51% versus 34% for fantasy. That's pretty good. 9% for historical and 6% for other. Let's see. Hardwired is Cyberpunk. It's been renamed Exploit Zero. Yeah, my print version is before they renamed it, so I have a print version of Hardwired, but I don't have Exploit Zero. I should maybe think about ordering it. Execution Force is a great solo if you're into 40K. Oh, that's one of all the different assassins and stuff, right? Yeah. I wish I liked the assassin models better, but I don't. We have several guys in our club that started with trains and then transitioned into wargames, mostly for the additional social and play possibilities. That's the thing. Like, I guess, well, I had a friend whose dad was super into trains when I was a kid. But I would still like to play. I'm not a competitive player. I'm not a constant player. I play when I can, but I'm always painting to play. I'm not a display painter particularly, other than that one model that so far that I've entered in a contest. But for the most part, I'm painting to play. I just paint a lot more than I play currently. Hoping to change that. But yeah, that's kind of the trick. Wanted to get into Age of Sigmar, but getting the kids Dark Imperium and having to paint most of it for them got me hooked on 40k instead. Sure. Painting some 54mm fantasy figures this morning, but also have 1/72nd scale medieval historicals on my table. My historical interests are primarily ancients to early gunpowder. Interesting. Just finished straightening the garage. Well, that's good. Fantasy is closer to the history I'm interested in than sci-fi is. Makes sense, sure. Love the 40k lore, hate the game. Love the Age of Sigmar, hate the lore. Interesting. Twitch is tough on TV because its app is crappier than YouTube app on TV. I guess it depends, maybe. I don't know. I find that the app, like I said, on the Apple TV for Twitch is just fine. Like, well, I was gonna say you can't like read chat at the same time, but technically you can. You can do a thing where it like kind of like it goes kind of picture in picture, and then the picture kind of zooms up here, and then the chat's like over here or whatever, or well, opposites way, you know. But you know what I'm saying. But yeah, that's interesting. Guy asked if we wanted to try a Vietnam War historical. Feels weird my grandpa was there. Yeah, see, that's the same issue that I've got with, Vietnam. Even, you know, like normal modern type stuff, you know, like Iraq War, things like that. Yeah, like guy across the street, like, was in the Iraq War, you know, or, well, he was at least in Iraq. I don't know if he was in there during fighting or anything, but yeah. So, you know, yeah, I get it. In historicals lately, I have tried to avoid periods that anyone cares too much about in the real world. So yeah, same here. Yeah. My dad did the World War II thing, so I was into World War II in pre-teens. Didn't like Western Front stuff. Hate the thought of putting dad on the tabletop. Did Eastern Front, evil versus evil, less sympathy for the combatant. Sure. Dust 1947 and Mythic Americas are my current favorites. I chatted with the guys from Mythic Americas at Gen Con this year. I think it was Gen Con. Yeah, it was Gen Con. I talked to a couple of the guys that kind of like run that whole thing. Really interesting concepts. One, a weird war sci-fi game, and the other being a fantasy game based off of indigenous American cultures. Yeah, it's like, I think that is there Aztecs and Mayans in that, or am I know there's other ones as well, like more North America versus, say, South America, or even, you know, Central America. But yeah, it was an interesting concept, and there's some really cool models too. Love to get a copy of Space Hulk, but it's going for 400 quid on Amazon. Yeah, no, it's crazy. I started with board games, Panzer Blitz to be specific. Gotcha. Diesel Punk World War II is my favorite. Hey, Gaddis, how you doing? Yeah, I was really into Dust Warfare. That was really my jam for a while. Like, I really enjoyed. I loved the fact that the models were already like kind of pre-primed, and so you could just sort of add to them if you wanted to, and kind of pick out details and throw some weathering on them and all that kind of stuff, and you didn't have to go crazy. I loved the like walking tanks kind of aesthetic to some degree, and like there was just everything about that game was very cool. But it was specifically Dust Warfare, which was because there was Dust Tactics at first, which was played like on a grid, and it was a little bit more board gaming, and I wasn't into that. And then there was Dust Warfare, which was played like a normal miniatures game. It was written by Mac Martin and Andy Chambers. Andy Chambers being one of the original designers for 40k, and Mac Martin being one of the original designers for Malifaux. And I just really liked the game system a lot. It was very cool. And then Fantasy Flight sold it or something to Battlefront, and then some other stuff happened, and then blah, and then everything went to crap, and all this kind of stuff, and then it turned into Dust 1947, and it became its own company, and the models were great, and they added even like a Cthulhu faction in, but the rules just didn't stick with me, and rules are super important for me. So yeah, I wish that, but now they've, I think, closed their doors, so that's a bummer. I'm hoping that somebody else picks it up at some point. Silver Bayonet may be a historical for me. Dracula's America may not be into historical. I may not like historical games then. Yeah, I mean, both of them are like weird historical games in that they didn't really happen. Dracula's America technically didn't happen. Silver Bayonet, same thing. Just talked to Jordan from Earthbound Games yesterday. He's open to come back to TMX again this year. Nice. World War II, we played Germans versus Russians, so bad dudes versus bad dudes. Gotcha. Reminds me of that old Reese's commercial where you put your World War II in my sci-fi. Yeah, you got your sci-fi in my World War II. Relic Blade looks fun. It's a fun little fantasy skirmish. It's really nicely done, and it's got cool. The models are great, and yeah, no, it's a good system. Little Wars TV is my go-to for historical gaming content. It's a good channel. Yeah, if you're into historical specifically, yeah. Though I like sci-fi games best overall, my all-time favorite game is Forbidden Psalm. Nice. Had such a great and oftentimes hilarious campaign system. Yeah, no, Forbidden Psalm was amazing. If you like sci-fi though and like Forbidden Psalm, you might want to take a look at Kill Sample Process. It's cyberpunk, but it's on the Forbidden Psalm engine, and it's designed by the same guy. So I played and loved Battletech. I still love the lore, but it is insane to get into. 3 box sets, ton of books, and another easy game in Alpha Strike. Yeah, no, it's I played the video games for a while too, and I've gotten out of that just because being in the cockpit, I just don't. Yeah, there's the BattleTech game that Harebrained Schemes made, which is you're not in the cockpit, and it's more turn-based, and it's like it's almost kind of like you're playing a miniature game. You're not playing the miniature game. It is not a one-to-one recreation in any stretch of the imagination, but it is definitely more turn-based and moving, models around, and you maybe run a lance and then you're going up against some guys. And that game is fun. I enjoy that. But the Mech Warrior games, being in the cockpit, I just am not interested in that anymore, and I don't know why. I think part of it is because in the early days of it, all you did was just walk in a circle with your torso twisted and try to shoot each other in the legs, and that was sort of dull. But yeah. Recently, it's been epic scale historical. A couple of my local people get together and manage to do a whole Waterloo battle. Wow. A War Transformed. That's the one that I was talking about. Yeah, the World War I game. Starfleet battles last week after a 30-year hiatus. Still really a lot of fun. Well, that's cool. Still really a lot of phases, too, I bet. I remember last time I paid attention to Starfleet battles, I think there were 28 different phases per turn. And that's not a joke. Like, there were literally, like, it was like, I'm not saying like, oh, first is movement, and then there's initiative, and then not like those types of phases, but like activation phases. There were 28 different phases. Back in the old days of Car Wars, I believe you had 10 activation phases because it depended on how fast you were going. If you were going 100 miles per hour, then you moved in every one of the phases. If you were moving 10 miles an hour, you only moved in one. If you're moving 50 miles an hour, you moved in half, 5 of them, or whatever, that kind of thing. That's the way they did it. And I believe in the very early days of Starfleet battles that it was 32 phases, but they streamlined it down to 28. But it's been a real long time. I think the last time that I played Starfleet battles, I think I played it at my parents' house because I still lived there. So it was some time ago. I remember playing it in the dining room with my friend Peter. We need a channel to cover all the Osprey titles. Hard to know if the games are up your alley without seeing a battle report. For a lot of Osprey titles, take a look at Ash. Ash Barker over at Gorilla Miniature Games. Gorilla like the freedom fighter, not like the giant monkey. That type of gorilla. He is probably the channel that I follow the most for battle reports because he does talk about a lot of indie stuff and things like that. He's done battle reports for our games, for me and Vince's games. He's done battle reports for lots of different games out there. And he has, because he's worked with Osprey in the past, he's written 2 games for Osprey. He did a zombie one called The Last Day or Last Days, something like that. And he did a mech one called Omega Wolves, Orion Wolves, Gamma Wolves, and yeah, and he did both of those with Osprey, and he might have done something else with Osprey as well, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But then now Steel Rift, he's not doing with Osprey. That's with Death Ray Designs, which is pretty cool. I highly recommend XCOM multiplayer if you wanted to play a digital miniature game. Yeah, oh, for sure. Do you plan on trying out Ravage Star? I'll take a look at the rules. I mean, I've painted some of the miniatures, but I haven't seen the rules. Sometimes there are only games that you play at conventions, never see them in the game store. Yeah, that does happen too. Is Warhammer Fantasy Battle more akin to pulp fantasy like Conan and Elric? No, I don't think so. Microsol and Microset smell like vinegar to me. Microset smells like vinegar. I noticed that on Friday. Microset definitely smells like vinegar. Microsol doesn't as much. Titan's Terrain, is that who makes the fold-up stuff, the pop-up stuff? Only ever used Microset directly on paint, never had a problem. Maybe you got a bad batch. Yeah, I don't know. I think it like I just put it on and it just dried relatively quickly and I didn't know what it was supposed to do. Like I said, I've always had better luck for years. I've always had better luck laying down a gloss varnish first, waiting for it to dry, and then doing my model or my stuff over the top of that. Monster Fight Club terrain is flat pack. I mean, the little these things here, these cargo containers, yes, but they also have plenty of stuff that's kind of not, like they're trees. I mean, you can take them apart, kind of, but they don't flat pack because they, but they do come apart. I would change my sci-fi vote if historical was Weird War historical. Well, that's part of it, I guess. You know what I mean? Kickstarter has a few foldable options, but also look at Fat Dragon Papercraft Terrain. Made a table of city buildings. Take the roof off, and the buildings fold right up. Nice. Just got a big YouTube ad for Lego-like terrain. Can't remember the name of it, though. A lot of historical players also play sci-fant, perhaps not so much the other way around. Gotcha. Car Wars, for sure. There's a bunch of high fantasy novels that are actually post-apocalypse. It's a fun concept. Yeah, I see that sometimes too, where they're like, you've been reading this book for a while and you think it's mainly a fantasy book, and then all of a sudden they're like ruined skyscrapers, and you find out that it's like way super in the future and blah blah blah, and societies all crumble and whatever, and now this is what's going on. It's kind of a twist sometimes they put into those kind of type of books. It's an Aussie law that you have to watch Mad Max as children. I mean, it's probably a good. I would assume you watch it in school. I just want one game that allows me to pit my fantasy land schnecks against my space fungus. I don't know what either of those things are, but they sound fun. I mean, there's probably something out there. Low budget apocalypse for the first Mad Max, so less money for dressing the hospital set. I just, like I said, I've always felt like, and I don't know if I've read this someplace, but I always felt like Mad Max, like the apocalypse had started. It just wasn't, it wasn't, like I said, overnight, but definitely things were breaking down and going to crap. Welcome to the apocalypse. The clothing stores only sell hockey masks and jock straps. I mean, you know, there are times when I think to myself, I should really go to, we have this chain of used sporting goods stores around in this area. I don't know if it's a national chain, but I've only ever seen them around here, but it's called Play It Again Sports. And every once in a while, I think to myself, I should go to Play It Again Sports and get a hockey stick and shoulder pads, like football shoulder pads now, just in case, just to prepare for when the apocalypse comes, because then I'm going to need to wear shoulder pads. I'm going to have to paint them up, spray paint them black or whatever, put some spikes on them, and then a hockey stick. And that seems to be generally what you need for the apocalypse. But I should probably be doing that. Like, it's always a situation like the beginning days of like the COVID thing. I'm like, I should maybe run over that real quick and get myself some shoulder pads. Love fleet battle games. Full Thrust is still my favorite sci-fi fleet battle game. I've heard of that. I wish that someone would have picked up Dust 47. Yeah, it would be good to see if somebody could. What exactly book-wise do I need to play Kill Team properly? I keep seeing and hearing that it's very all over the place to get into, like, cards and books not being available more. What do you do? Ooh, that's a good question. If you want to get into Kill Team, you would need the core book, which is just basically a rule book. I think it costs $50. I don't know if it's available currently in print on the website, but you could probably find it online or find it, you know, like at a local store. I know my local store's got copies of it still. Then there is a compendium, so the previous version of Kill Team, you bought the Kill Team core book and it had the rules in it and also had the army lists for most of the armies. There were some new ones that came out after the, you know, the original book came out. Like they came out with like Sisters of Battle, and they came out with, I don't know, some other ones. But the $140 book covered you. Well, that we can't have that. You got to buy now two $50 books. That's so much better. Anyway, so at the very least, you would need the core book and probably the compendium. And the compendium will allow you to build army lists for other armies. Also in the downloads section of the Warhammer community website, if you go under Kill Team downloads or whatever, there's also a bunch of other specific downloadable army lists for very specific models or whatever. They're more bespoke or whatever. But yeah, you know, but really the only two things, like, you don't really need the cards. You don't need any of that trash. You need the two books, really. Yeah. And the main book you really need is the core rule book, or the core book, or whatever they call it, core rules, something like that. With how popular the current rendition of Kill Team is, I feel like they'd be crazy to radically change the game, the way it plays. Yeah, I think it'd be real dumb at this point to, I guess, change it again, unfortunately, because I kind of wish that they would. I still really don't like the army building rules in it, so. Revisit an atlas with modern paints for Crystal Brush and Nova Open. Or Capital Palette probably is what you mean there. No, I don't. I have not yet seen a BattleTech Mini that has impressed me. Like, they're just, I don't know. They're just, like, all the detail on those, especially on the new ones, are so soft. It's just such soft detail. Like, I don't mean that they're bendy like rubber or anything like that. I mean, like, nothing comes to a sharp point anywhere. Everything is kind of rounded. And that comes from, how am I trying to say this? When you see a model and nothing is a sharp line and everything is kind of smoothed, that's just because they skimped, they saved money on the model. It is cheaper to make a steel mold that has less detail than it does to make more detail. With metal and with like resin models, the mold cost is the same because you're literally taking a master, right? And you're putting it in here in this chamber, and then you're filling it full of like rubber, you know, vulcanized rubber stuff, liquid, which then goes around the model, and then you pull it apart or whatever you do, and now you have these molds, and you pour stuff and blah, blah, blah. But with steel molds for plastic injecting, it's not like they're getting a bunch of molten steel and pouring it over a master. That would destroy pretty much everything. What they're doing is they're taking two halves of this like metal mold blank, and they are literally grinding out with like a little robot arm with tiny, tiny, tiny little bits, little tiny diamond tipped bits. They're grinding out the it's called tooling from what I understand, but they're grinding out the inside of the two pieces that come together, and then you get injection molded with hot plastic. So it's a grinding situation. Well, when you want to grind smaller and smaller and sharper details, you need tinier and tinier bits, and they have to be replaced more frequently because they break or whatever. So it's much more expensive to get like super fine, sharp detail than to get, this is sort of detailed. You know what I mean? That is a much cheaper mold. And it seems to me like all of the new plastics that I've seen from Battletech, nothing is as sharp. Like everything is kind of soft. So I wouldn't really spend a ton of time painting a Battletech miniature to try to win an award, because it's just, there's not, I mean, maybe if you did a diorama, that's a different story, but if just painting like one dude or whatever, like one atlas, yeah, I don't know. Doesn't seem like what I'd be interested in. Any plans to stream some live battles in the future? Would watch? I feel like it's going to be crazy boring, but I do want to try it eventually. Not sure when, but eventually. Kind of surprised there isn't really a horror genre that isn't specifically sci-fi. It's clearly distinct from being a fantasy game. I mean, there are horror games out there, like Don't Look Back is a big one. That's from Blacksite Studios. In that situation, it's like a co-op game because you have this sort of like AI run kind of Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, etc., whatever, and then you and the people who are also playing are all like the teenagers trying to get away kind of thing. That's what's going on. Besides from the game Don't Look Back, so that's a horror kind of thing. There's not a lot of horror games though. Otherwise, beyond that, I wish we got more in whatever game Thundercats, the genre Thundercats and He-Man is. Let's see here. Dark Sword Miniatures makes awesome metal minis. Nice. There we go. Let's see here. I'll never forget that in 1994, man's civilization was cast in ruins. Good old Thundar the Barbarian, indeed. Started painting and collecting in the early 80s with Grenadier and Ralpartha, but almost all of those were one-piece metal figures. I mean, one piece is not so hard, or not so bad, because obviously, you know, the biggest problem for me with metal miniatures is having to glue a bunch of stuff together, because very frequently, if you want it to stay, you have to pin it, and that's a pain in the butt. It's a whole thing. But yeah. Afternoon from Puckle Church. That's a lot of fun to say. In my country, Age of Sigmar is easier to find pickup games for than in 40K, but possible with both. But yeah, only really available for the most popular games in your area. Sure. If you're into pickup gaming, which I'm generally not. Isn't Space Hulk a horror game? It's certainly like a horror / sci-fi game for sure. Star Wars is a space opera, yeah. Magic the Gathering killed any interest in competition for me. That was brutal. I'm even apprehensive about submitting a model for Wonderfest. Yeah, I played some, we used to play Magic way back in the 90s. When I was in college. I remember I worked at a camera store that was in like a little mini mall. And on the other end of the mini mall, there was what the heck was that place? Oh, there was a Hobby Town. That's right. There was a Hobby Town on the other end of the mini mall, and they sold Magic cards. And so I would go down there on my break sometimes from the camera shop, and I would buy packs. And yeah, I was in college, and we played a bunch in the early 90s. And then I got rid of all my cards and traded in for other stuff. And then, yeah. Someone mentioned 5 Parsecs from Home. It's a good game. I don't know that I would say it's Cyberpunk, if that's what we're talking about. Have you or Sam played with the new warbands from Warcry that come with the Sarlacc pit? No, we haven't. I have the models, I think. I mean, I think I can say that. I'm pretty sure I can. Chess is good, but people get testy when you glue little laser guns, swords, and paint their chess pieces. I mean, while they're playing, yes, they do get mad about that. That's for sure. You motivate me to start my own tabletop game, working on rules and models at the moment. Any tips? Maybe even if I want to publish. The tip that I tell everybody who asks about getting into publishing or designing or whatever, any kind of war game, is that the very first thing that you should do, and it's not the first thing you've done here because you didn't ask, and so I'm just telling you now, but the very first thing you need to do is to build a audience. That's the most important thing, is you need to figure out a way to build an audience, whether you start a blog, whether you start an Instagram, whether you start a YouTube channel, whatever, or Twitter maybe, but I don't know if I'd go down that road. Start building an audience, start building followers. That's the most important thing. If you would like to, unless you just don't want to ever sell it. Like if you're just like, I want to make a fun game that me and my friends are going to play, then don't worry about it. But if you're like, I'm thinking about publishing this at some point, sure, you have to design a game that you enjoy and that's well done and or whatever, all that kind of jazz. But you can make an amazing game that is really quite good and that people would really enjoy. But if they never hear about it, it's not gonna, you know what I mean? Or if you're rich, I guess, then you could spend a bunch of money on marketing once you get the game done. That's also a possibility. So if you're independently wealthy, just keep doing that. But most of us aren't, as it turns out. So yeah, it's really about building an audience. If you get people who like the things you talk about on your blog or the things you post on your Instagram that are, wargaming related, I would assume. Like if you just get a bunch of people who follow your awesome cat pictures and then you're like, hey, I got this tabletop war game, they're gonna be like, what now? But start some sort of thing where you start to gain an audience, because that's super important for making it so that your game can get some sort of traction. Yeah, there's so many things out there right now that it's really hard to get kind of differentiated and like get people interested. So if your goal is to sell some product actually and to get people, it's not even so much to sell the product. Even if you decided, I'm not going to sell this is going to be a free download, that's cool, but you still want people to download it and try it out and give you feedback or play it with their friends or enjoy it in some fashion. You need to build an audience. That's just kind of, and the thing is that it's important to figure out what kind of audience. Like I can talk obviously to people for, hours at a time, and it's not a problem for me. But some people don't do well with public speaking. Some people don't, some people don't like the way they write, but they can talk fine. Or some people don't like the way they talk, but they can write fine, or some people are like, well, I don't like either of those things, but boy, I can take some cool pictures or whatever. That's where you want to go with that. You want to start by building some sort of audience. Is Snarling Badger using this poll to plan out the next game genre? I mean, it's not surprising me. Let's say that, right? It does not surprise me. So it's not like I'm going to be like, the long answer is no. But yeah, no. Short answer is no. Long answer is not really. But it is interesting to see it. Partially, the main reason that I used this, that I came up with the idea for this poll was because when I first started every other Sunday show, I've always made it so like there needed to be kind of a subject sort of so that I could have a thumbnail, right? Otherwise it would just be the same thumbnail over and over and over again or whatever. And sometimes it's hard to come up with a subject. So this idea popped up into my head sometime last night, and I was like, oh, that'd be a good subject. And we don't usually always stick to the subject. The show is not about the subject. The subject usually gets touched on in some fashion in any given, every other Sunday show. But yeah, that's honestly the long and short of it. Was I was like, that might be something to talk about, and then I did. But again, this is not blowing my socks off and being like, oh wow, I didn't expect that, so no, let's say no. Vindicare model is awesome in my opinion. See, in my opinion, I don't like it. Like I want to have, well, for a while I kicked around the idea of having having a Vindicare assassin that I could put into my 1,000-point list for guard. And then I was like, I don't like the model. So then I was like, although it's better than all the other ones, all the rest of the assassins are much but uglier, but than much but uglier. However, uh, it's still, I don't like the Vindicare assassin model much. I was just going to make my own, honestly, is what I was going to do. Ash did a review of Reality's Edge, but not sure if he ever did a Let's Play. Miniature Wargame Lab did a series of Learn to Play. Oh, that's cool. How big is the model / train wargaming overlap? Because a game where trains fight would bleed those guys while it's dry. Yeah, I don't know how you would do that. That would be interesting though. Like mixing the train gamers or the not the train gamers, the train modelers and also wargaming. That'd be interesting. How do you like streaming YouTube versus Twitch? I do both. I've been doing YouTube longer, obviously. They're different. They're very different. It's interesting. Although they are starting to come a little bit more into parity. Definitely YouTube is moving slowly into Twitch's kind of lane. You know what I mean? I still very strongly believe that and I've said this before, if on any given morning YouTube woke up and chose violence, they could end Twitch in about a year. Like if the Alphabet Corporation was like, you know what we're going to do? They could make Twitch, they could basically make Amazon go, yeah, we're shutting her down, because there's no point anymore. But they just don't seem like they want to do it. Like they're edging into little bits here and they're like, oh, hey, look at this. Now you've got like gifted subs kind of. And oh, hey, you've got like, the little this and that. And so they're moving into different areas, but I feel like if they really just wanted to like go hard in the paint, they could easily take Twitch out very quickly, because Twitch, I feel, is in this weird spot where Amazon's like, yeah, I'm not sure what you guys. And I think that they could easily be pushed into shutting it down if YouTube pushed hard, but YouTube hasn't. YouTube has been very wary. I think it's the same thing that happened to some degree with esports. Like some people were like, esports is the next thing. Esports is going to be bigger than baseball. Like I've heard people say that. I've heard like marketing people being like, in 10 years, esports will be way bigger than baseball. And that may be the case, but it's seeming less and less likely as the couple of years go by here. Like esports was kind of a big deal for a bit, but FaZe Clan just went bankrupt after getting on a NASDAQ or something like that, $725 billion valuation. And then all of a sudden now I think did they get bought by somebody for like 20 million or something? I don't know. It was just like, it's nuts. It's like, I think that, I think the concept of esports, video games are obviously amazingly huge, giant sellers. It's a huge, like the tabletop gaming industry. And I'm not saying tabletop wargaming. I'm saying tabletop gaming, RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, board games, all that stuff is 100th the size in yearly revenue of the video game industry. Literally 100th, it's 1%. We make, like, last time I looked at the stats that are stuck in my brain, 2019, the tabletop gaming industry made $1.9 billion. That same year, the video game industry made $189 billion. So that's 1%. So that's great. That's awesome. Whatever. But the fact that people were like in the industry, like, yeah, but now we're going to turn it into football, but it's going to be video games. I don't know that that's a long-term thing. You're always going to see that level of competition, but the idea of having 80,000 people in a stadium to watch a bunch of guys play Counter-Strike Go, I don't know. I'm not sure that it's as big of a deal as they think it is. It's certainly not basketball, football, soccer, what, it's just, I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. I got way off on a tangent there. I apologize. I just cast my TV from my iPad to Twitch, which works from Twitch. Oh, that's interesting. Wizards with lasers, robot dragons, barbarian with plasma chainsaw. I mean, that's kind of what Thunder the Barbarian a little bit was. It was kind of interesting. I'm an Iraq veteran and I wouldn't mind playing a game set there. Totally get why others would feel different. For sure. Yeah, exactly. Father-in-law mentioned an old board game called Titan, so I picked that up the other day. Not sure what to expect, but I'm excited to get into it with him. Oh, that's cool. Good morning from Argentina. How you doing? Fantasy Flight is its own worst enemy. Yeah, yeah. The Dust IP was picked up and is being reworked by Cool Mini or Not. Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad. Because I'm not a fan of Cool Mini or Not, mostly. Why would they do that? Is that true? They picked up the Dust stuff and they're... Oh, that's... Because here's the thing. Cool Mini or Not has a terrible track record with miniature games. They love putting a miniature game out and then shutting it down almost immediately. It's astounding. They did it with Wrath of Kings, which annoyed the heck out of me because Wrath of Kings was a lot of fun. I liked the game system a lot, and the story was very, very cool, and the models were pretty good. Dark Age, which I just talked about recently in a YouTube video on Friday, or on a Friday recently, about how I bought into that game, and that was very, very cool. And, well, I take that back. The models were very cool. The rules were dumb. Just straight up dumb with a capital M. And then they shut that down. And so, yeah, if they're going to... Yeah, I'm amazed. Well, I'm not amazed. It seems like the thing that they would do now that you say it. But, yeah, that's weird. Who was the company that came to TMX? How'd they do? Are they coming next year? This year, One Page Rules had a booth. They were like, basically, we only really had 2 booths this year at TMX. It was, it was Snarling Badger Studios, and then it was One Page Rules. And they weren't selling anything really because One Page Rules doesn't, I mean, it's like a Patreon and, you know, that kind of stuff and whatever, but they were running demos and things like that. It was cool. They were using us as a kind of a trial, like they're planning on doing more booth stuff and they wanted to kind of start with us. And I was explaining to them, I'm like, literally, there's like 75, 80 people who are going to come to this at best. You know what I mean? Or whatever. It's not a big convention at all. And they were like, yeah, no, that's fine. We're still coming. But then I don't know if they had a booth at Essen, but I know that Jefferson, who was at TMX, was at Essen because I chatted with him a little bit on Discord. He's like, because I was asking a question. So I was talking about One Page Rules and I had a question in one of my videos, and he's like, well, basically he was like, I'm in Germany, I'll get back to you in like, you know, a couple hours when I get back to the hotel room. I was like, cool. And I was like, he's in Germany. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's right, Essen's going on. I hear a lot of love for Dust and Dust Tactics, Dust 47, all the versions always confuse me, but does anyone play Conflict 47? I would say more people play Conflict 47 than play Dust. Yeah, I mean, the Conflict 47, for one thing, is still in production. So there's that, yeah. Baldur's Gate 3 on PS5 is awesome. My nephew shared his copy with Awesome Games. Huh. Sci-fi or near future is my choice. I'm working on a co-op skirmish game with anthropomorphic animals. Furries, gotcha. That is mammals versus reptiles in a G.I. Joe setting. Oh, nice. That's cool. Apart from the last war, I don't like using weird wars for wargaming, only for role-playing. Possibly because when someone tries to design a World War II mecha, it looks pathetic. I don't know. I like the mechs. I like both the mechs from Dust and from Conflict 47. And Gear Krieg. Gear Krieg was pretty cool from DreamPod 9. That was more of an RPG, I think. Well, it sort of straddled the line, honestly. Fantasy a close second. Gotcha. We do have 4 players for Conflict 47. It's great fun, but does require 3 books and a FAQ. It's manageable, though, and a total blast. That is always the problem that I find with games. Yeah. As soon as I have to buy a second book, I'm a little like, I don't know if this is... That annoys me. Starfleet Battles was written for gamers who are engineers in real life. Yeah, it does. That does seem right. Little Wars TV just had a video that listed their best and worst Osprey Blue Book games. Nice. 5 Parsecs from Home, 5 Leagues from the Borderlands. Yep. Greens from Tinley Park. How you doing? If anyone hasn't heard of the video game Moonbreaker, it's a great turn-based miniature game that you can paint the miniatures in. Yeah, there's 2 actual games out on the internet right now, or on Steam or whatever. There's Moonbreaker, and the other one is called Demio or something like that. And they're both turn-based miniature games where you can paint the miniatures virtually. Like in Moonbreaker, like you've got like a dry brush tool and a wash tool and all this, and you can rotate the model around and be like, and you can be like, okay, I want to physically do this, or you can also just like hold down shift, and then like when you start painting the gun, you don't paint outside of the lines. Or you could let off shift and then paint outside the lines if you want to. You can do whatever you want, but it's kind of an interesting concept. But it is definitely like a turn-based kind of miniature game. But both of these games, which kind of came out at roughly the same time zone as each other, both of them have the concept of, yeah, you can paint your minis too if you want to. Except that Demio also has a VR component. So if you've got a VR headset, you can play the game that way, but you can also play it if you don't have a VR headset. Who did I watch? I watched the guys from Penny Arcade, Tycho and Eric Benson, EJB. They were playing that game against each other, and Tycho was playing on a regular PC and EJB was playing on like a headset. And so, but they were playing against each other, which was kind of a cool cross-platformy thing. Just describe the old school's wrestlers and the road warriors. Face paint, spiky shoulder pads, and a bad attitude. There you go. Now I want a pro wrestling game. There's been a couple. Impact Games, isn't that a wrestling game, I think, for miniatures? Short answer is no. Long answer is no. It's funny. While playing Xenos Rampant, I usually use my Star Wars Legion models against a couple of my friends. Oh, that's pretty cool. They're letting Twitch take the risks and then copying what works. I mean, yeah, that's very possible. I'm a fan of the cyberpunk aesthetic. Any games you're a fan of? I would say probably my two favorite at this point are probably going to be Kill Sample Process, which is an indie game from the same guy that does Forbidden Psalm, and then of course Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone, which is the full name of the other game, which is from Monster Fight Club. That's a pretty cool cyberpunk game too. Esports in some genres is much bigger than it was 5 years ago, especially iRacing. Yeah, that's probably true, but it's also starting from a smaller spot. Like I remember, 5, 6, 7 years ago when you would see, they would like, have an entire coliseum of people in LA and they all be watching, I don't know, whatever game, League of Legends. And that's great. But that is not, well, it's two things. Let's get back to that real quick. One thing is I think they also put too many eggs in a basket in one basket too quickly. I feel like that they were like, okay, this is this line's always going up, this train's never stopping, let's throw all our money into it, and that's not a good idea. I'm a big fan of start small and grow slowly, and they were not interested in doing either of those things because investors were just chucking money at people in bags and boxes, and so now you can see where we are. You know what I mean? You've got these big like esports organizations, FaZe Clan, 100 Thieves. The other ones, I can't think of the other names of any of them, but those are the two that I can think of off the top of my head. And they've got these like big buildings and all this stuff and whatnot, and they're like not making any money. And they're not exactly sure what to do right now. I just watched a short little documentary about FaZe Clan and how it fell apart. Overwatch League is gone now too. Yep. Beyond advice for building an audience, what advice do you have for writing a game book? My issue is compiling all my notes and making it readable by other people. The most important thing is to play test it. I mean, not even necessarily play test it, like just read test it. Give it to people to read. And then, because like the first game that I ever built with my friend Peter, we wrote everything all up and then we handed it off to some friends of ours, and we were in college, and we're like, go down to the lounge, at the end of the hall down there, and you take all of this stuff, and then we're not going to teach you how to play. You guys read it and then play and then give us notes. And they were back in like 4 or 5 minutes. And we're like, what's wrong? And they're like, there's nothing in here about how to start or how to win. Like we just hadn't, like we knew how to do it, but we had not written it down. So to a person who is like sitting, like we had rules about initiative and combat and this, but we just didn't say this is how you start the game and this is how you end the game. So we did, that kind of stuff is important. But even beyond just like missing rules or having the right rules is also, are you putting it in a way that people can find it in the book? That's also a big deal too. Yes, they were there at Spiel. Nice. Convention in Essen? Tell me more. Oh yeah, no, there's the world's biggest gaming convention is at Essen. It's called Essen Spiel or Spiel Essen. I forget how it's exactly said. I swear to God, I saw a thing that said it was 193,000 people this year. It's just crackers. I mean, like Gen Con is massive and it's 70,000, but it has nothing on Spiel. I have voted, but it's a very binary answer to a hexadecimal question. They only give me 4 choices. I thought I had more choices, but when I started filling out the poll, YouTube's like, oh yeah, no, we can't afford 5 or 6 or 10, for God's sakes. Anyway. Osprey Masterpiece, Gasland. Yeah, no, that's probably one of their best, for sure. Let's see here. Why are the tanks $35 each though? I don't know. Must be how much it costs to make them. There are a bunch of books, textbooks in game design and creation. Look for a new book by Scott Rogers. Yeah, there are some books out there for sure about that stuff too. Does anyone know what the Red Robot Mini from today's video's splash screen comes from? I think, I'm 98% sure I bought it off of eBay. Or, sorry, Etsy. But I could be wrong. Or maybe I got it off of My Mini Factory. I would search on My Mini Factory for robot. And if you don't find it there, then maybe check Etsy for like 3D printed robot miniature, something like that, and you'll probably find it. But it's not, it's a 3D print, and I just but I don't remember where it came from. I originally was in Space Station Zero, like I used it in the videos and stuff like that, and it's in some of the photography inside the book too. So it's from, I got it at least a year and a half, if not 2 years ago. So all right, well everybody, it's a little bit after 11, so currently we're at sci-fi at 50% fully, and then fantasy is at 36, and historical is at 8, and other is at 6. So I'm going to hit end poll. Boom, I just did it. There we go. Right there, boom. Poll complete, 573 votes. I appreciate that. So thanks to everybody for coming by today. I appreciate it. I hope you folks have a good rest of your day. And then hope you have a good week. I don't know. So I'll be back here again in 2 weeks. Otherwise, if you're interested, I'll be on Twitch tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Time, which might not be night in your neck of the woods, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I'll be probably finishing up my Imperial Guard. I put a little water slide decal on my last artillery piece on Friday's show, along with doing some other stuff on some other bits. But yeah, we'll probably get that thing nearly finished up, I would think, on Monday. And then going from there, we'll have to figure it out. So thanks to everybody for coming by again, like I said, and have yourselves a good day. And